Hi, in today's video I would like to discuss about the recent Talisman Sinclair nerf and the Malphos situation. As we all know, recently Limbus put out an incredibly controversial update that nerfed a particular character and would have nerfed another one if it wasn't for community backlash. In this video I want to discuss the history and downfall of Talisman Sinclair, how he existed in the meta of the game and how ultimately he was put to rest. And I would also like to put my 2 cents on Malphos and the issue I don't feel like has been addressed. To begin with, we must go all the way back to Season 2 of the first year of the game, when Talisman Sinclair was released. This was back when Project Moon barely had any idea what they would do with the Rupture mechanic. At the time, Rupture teams were barely a thing, but that isn't saying much. At this time, Project Moon still had no idea what they would do with the status ailment mechanics. The best teams at the time were a mishmash of different identities, whatever rolled high enough and did the most damage. A stark contrast to current day Limbus with the identities we have available that form actual archetypes and teams that synergize with each other, revolving around the different status ailments as previously mentioned. The gameplay since then has truly gained an identity, no pun intended, compared to when it was starting out. But going back to Talisman Sinclair, he was mainly used in Rupture teams. If you don't know, Rupture is a status ailment that causes an enemy to take damage equal to the amount of Rupture that is stacked on them, every time they are hit with the cost of 1 Rupture count. Rupture potency and Rupture count both stack to a maximum of 99. The damage that is inflicted by Rupture is a true damage, so it is unaffected by resistances. Now, if you haven't realized, Rupture as a mechanic on its own is straight up broken. That is the main limitation that every Rupture unit is balanced around until they recently threw that out of the window. But I digress. A lot of early Rupture units, especially release units, barely function as Rupture units, as their kits did not contain any Rupture count. Theoretically, if you reach 99 Rupture, you will be doing 99 damage with each attack coin your unit has on their skill. And some Rupture units have up to 4 coins for their attack skills, meaning you could do almost 400 true damage with a single attack skill. To put this to perspective, the most damage most units can do is around 100 damage with a 3rd skill, if they're 45 SP, without any other limiting factors. So basically, Rupture was a boss shredder. As singular enemies were the easiest to build Rupture on, but again, this is all in theory, as you would need to increase potency while also maintaining count, which early units were terrible at, as most didn't even have Rupture count built into their skills, and the units that did have count in their skills were either Rupture count negative or Rupture count neutral, meaning that increasing Rupture count was a Sisyphean task. Most notable ways of maintaining Rupture count at the time were Ebony Apple Otis with its passive that allowed Otis to give 1 Rupture count for each heads hit on attack skill next turn, and ADD Gregor, which inflicts Spark Discharge, which inflicts 1 Rupture count for each Gloom attack coin used. The release of Talisman Sinclair, Rupture became somewhat usable, but to understand why, we must look at his kit first. Talisman Sinclair is a 2-star identity, with his first skill Magnify Wound, which is a 1-coin Gluttony affinity skill that can roll as high as a 10. On hit, it inflicts 2 Rupture, and if the target has 5+ to Rupture, he gains 1 Talisman. His second skill, Proliferating Talisman, is a 3-coin Pride skill that can roll as high as 13, all 3 coins having the same effect, where he gains 1 Talisman, and if the target has Rupture, he gains 1 Talisman. His third skill, Rupture and Talisman, is a 2-coin Lust skill that rolls as high as 17. On coin 1, Sinclair spends 5 Talisman on self and gives 5 Talisman to the target, and on the second coin he gives the target plus 3 Rupture count if they have Talisman. And lastly, his defense skill is a Gluttony Guard that on use gives him 1 Talisman. Now to describe his kit as bad is an understatement. He was absolutely one of the worst designed IDs in the game, for the main reason that his kit literally worked against him and was infuriating to use. And yet he was still one of the most important IDs in any Rupture team, and this was solely due to Talisman. What Talisman used to do before it was nerfed was that the target with Talisman would inflict Rupture potency or receive Rupture potency equal to the Talisman on them. Talisman single-handedly solved the second greatest issue Rupture had, which was potency. While the Rupture count still was way harder to maintain the potency, the fact you didn't have to worry about it allowed Rupture teams to solely focus on Rupture count. There were 2 main ways of using Talisman Sinclair. The first was just using him in a regular Rupture team, which was the most annoying method. As I mentioned earlier, his kit was infuriatingly difficult to use. The main way to use him was using his skill 2 to get 5 talisman and then using his skill 3 to give those talisman to a target. But the main issue was the fact that if talisman went over 5, it would be consumed at the end of the turn. And if you want to use him as effectively as possible, he required to be at uptie 4. Since if he was at uptie 3, he would require an extra turn to reach 5 talisman stacks, and even if he was at uptie 4, you will need to hit a target that does not have Rupture in order to gain 5 talisman, because if you didn't notice, his skill 2 gives him 6 in total. The way this works is due to the fact that his first coin does not apply the second effect, because he doesn't inflict Rupture with the first effect of that coin unless the target had a Rupture on them. Now, a funny thing that happened to me once when I was running my Rupture team in the Mirror Dungeon was that I had an ego gift that made Sinclair do Rupture on the first coin, so he would end up with 6 talisman, which made him basically useless. Now, if you actually do get 5 talisman on him and use his skill 3 to give it to a target, it was basically game over whomever you were facing, as basically all your units would be giving 5 Rupture potency with each hit. And by the time count would run out, whatever enemy you were facing would probably be dead. Moving on to the second way of using Talisman Sinclair, which was also the absolute best way of using him, which was not to use him at all. His role was to sit in the cuck chair for other IDs to do his job better than him. This was due to his off-bench passive, which gave the IDs with the most health talisman 2 times the highest resonance up to maximum of 12 talisman, meaning if you could get a resonance with all the same affinities, the highest health unit would be dealing 12 Rupture potency with each hit. Well, this doesn't sound as good on paper, since the 12 talismans would be lost at the end of the turn and you still have to worry about a Rupture count. It was arguably better for the sole fact that you didn't have to use Talisman Sinclair. This was until the advent of Deviate Rhodia, where the strategy became the undisputed best way to play Rupture. Ironically enough, Rhodia was pretty slept on when she was announced, as she didn't do much for the Rupture in theory, but when she came out, it turned out she was usually the one with the most HP out of any Rupture unit, meaning she was the best talisman carrier. And not only that, but she also was part of a new Rupture archetype that was coming out around the start of Season 7. Essentially, the archetype had an effect where they could not increase Rupture potency, but they couldn't decrease Rupture count, meaning they would always be Rupture count neutral. The thing was, Talisman would inflict Rupture potency regardless, so Rhodia could still inflict a Rupture potency without consuming count. She could inflict a whopping 48 Rupture potency with her 4 coins skill 3 in a singular turn. This marked Rupture as a proper archetype that didn't have to rely on RG or on skills to actually do well. Rupture up until Season 8 didn't change at all, much beside the Mao IDs, which improved the archetype by a lot, which were released right before Season 8 officially started, and then Malphos happened. Malphos was not the sole reason Talisman was nerfed. It was always a ticking time bomb, as most of Rupture's balance decisions always revolved around him specifically. It also made any other Rupture Sinclair IDs completely unusable. People absolutely laughed at how relevant Deviate Sinclair was when he released, as he had nothing that came close to Talisman. Talisman Sinclair had to go, for Rupture to not ruin the entire balance of the game. For the longest time, he was the biggest crutch in the game to make Rupture playable, so it is understandable that he needed to be nerfed, especially considering the power of the newest Rupture IDs, especially Malphos. The script was written before Hong Yuan, Hong Lu, so you can imagine how strong Rupture would be if they still had access to full power Talisman Sinclair. In this part of the script, I kind of just talk about how Malphos did power creep 7 Association Faust, and how 7 Association Faust is not a viable side grade to her. But in reality, I realized that Malphos requires the other Heisha branch identities to actually function as a Rupture unit, compared to 7 ID Faust that doesn't require any other units to work well. So this part of the script is a bit pointless, but regardless, in retrospect, seeing how the Heisha branch ID, all the Heisha branch IDs and how they work together, I think Rupture is in a really good state, and I think it's the Talisman Sinclair dying is the best thing that could have happened. Because imagine if Talisman Sinclair still existed, they would have to they'd have to like fuck up the game so much more. Regardless, I'd like to know what everyone thinks. This part of the video is a bit unscripted, but if you watched it for this long, thank you very much. And leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Bye bye.